Everyone, as I've said, I will be giving you a pre-recorded video or pre-recorded discussion regarding to our lesson, which is skeletal system. So let's start. Without further ado, let's start our discussion. So by this first slide, as you can see, imagine for a moment that the people do not have skeletons. So as you can see, what is the difference between a human that has a skeletons and a human that has no skeleton. So by the picture itself, like for example in the man or in the boy, yung walang foundation, or if there is no skeleton itself, nakikita niyo naman, as I've said, skeletal or your skeleton is the foundation or the basis of your body. That is why you can walk, that is why you can stand because of the skeleton. So from this picture, we can definitely say that skeleton is very important. So let's proceed now to our topic, which would leads to the skeletal system. So since our topic is all about skeletal system, let's define first what is skeletal system. So skeletal system consists of bones and other structures that make up the joints of the skeleton. Or in other words, to be exact, skeletal system is your central framework, meaning to say it consists of bone and connected tissue. It also includes, as for example, part of your skeletal system like cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. So as part of this discussion, we will be discussing those definition of those parts. So aside from that, skeletal system also is called as the musculoskeletal system. So that is the definition or the explanation of the definition of skeletal system. Always remember that it is your body's central framework. And as I've said, the tissues or the types of tissues presented in the bone in our skeleton or in the skeletal system are those bone tissue, cartilage, fibrous connective tissue, which eventually can be formed as the ligaments that connect to bone to bone. So that is why in the skeletal system, cartilage, tendons are included in the type of tissue. So that's it. That is the definition of skeletal system, and it's what are those parts that is included to the skeletal system. So let's proceed now to the next slide. So this is the representation on how can we signify those major organs of the skeletal system and its function. So this one, I've already specified this one in our first discussion, like in the organ system. Napakilala ko na ito, na-introduce ko na sa inyo. That is why I've said that in that time, I will be introducing those major parts in the different types of system. So now, since iniisa-isa na natin ang system, so let's go now to the skeletal system. We've already done in the integumentary. So for the major organs, as I've said, it includes bones, cartilages, associated ligaments, and bone marrow. So the major function for skeletal system is provide supports and protection for other tissues, stores calcium and other minerals, forms blood cells. So one of the major function of skeletal system, I've said a while ago, that stores calcium and other minerals. So in this kind of statement, why do bones or why do our skeleton store a calcium? So the answer would be our bones store calcium for your blood and cells. So if your body doesn't get enough calcium, which can be found in some food and drinks, it takes it from your bones. So that is why the major function for the skeletal system is stores calcium and minerals. Okay, so let's now proceed to the other slide. So let's now focus on the function of the skeleton. Provides framework that supports the body. The muscles that attach to bones move the skeleton. That is the reason why we can walk, why we can walk, and why we can flex our body, and kung bakit tayo nakakatakbo, nakakalakad, nakaka-flex, nakakakuha ng bagay na gusto nating kunin because of the skeleton, and of course the muscles that attach to the skeleton. So as you can see in the picture, napaka understandable naman that bones is one of the reason why we can flex our body. Why we can, bakit tayo nakakaupo, bakit tayo nakakatakbo at nakakalakad. At bakit natin nakukuha yung mga bagay-bagay na malayo sa atin? Because of the skeleton. So aside from that, it is also the protection of some internal organs from mechanical injury that the rib cage protects. The heart and lungs, for example. Oh yes. So since we have bone in the part of the heart and lungs, that will serve as the protection of our heart and lungs. So that's why, as you can see, the rib, it's actually called as the rib cage kasi nakikita nyo, nakakulong si heart and lungs. And that is the good thing of that because it serves as the protection of two internal sensitive part of the body. So that is why bone or skeleton is important also, or one of the function of the bone and skeleton is this one, the protection for the internal parts, like for example those parts that is very sensitive and enough. So that is why there is so called skeleton or the rib cage. Okay, let's go on. So this is some example on the position or the location of the lungs and the heart. So as you can see nga, sinasabi natin that it is called as a cage because nakapalibot talaga siya sa internal organ na yan. Basically, it can protect and support the two sensitive or the two part, which is the lungs and the heart. Okay, let's proceed again to another slide. Aside from that, aside from the protection, support, and also leads with the how can we flex or how can we walk, skeleton also contains and protects the red bone marrow from the primary hemopoietic or the blood forming tissue. Or to be exact, when we say hemopoietic, it is actually the production of all types of blood cells. So as you can see, from the internal part of our bone, nakikita natin ang red bone marrow or the blood forming tissue. Yan. So aside from protection or supporting the internal part, which is heart and the lungs, skeleton also or our bone also can protect and contain the red bone marrow that serve as the blood forming tissue inside. So pwede din siya nakakaprotekta or naproprotektahan din ni bone ang red bone marrow and of course in the blood forming tissue. Kasi bakit I've said that why red bone marrow is in the hemopoietic part, because as I've said, in hemopoietic organs, ngayon pa lang pala as I will give you an information that hemopoietic system or the one of the hemopoietic organ in a hemopoietic system is the bone marrow. Bone marrow, spleen, tonsils, and lymph nodes are involved in the hemopoietic organs. Why? Because they're involved also in the production of the blood. So, kaya nakikita nyo yung mga maliliit na red dyan, spots, because hemopoietic or hemopoietic organs such as red bone marrow can produce a blood. Okay? Yon. So, that is the explanation of why the bone or the skeleton is one of the function of it is contains and protects the red bone marrow kasi, yun na nga, there is a hemopoietic organ that represented in the red bone marrow. And the skeleton or the bone itself can protect it. Okay? So let's go now to another slide. Aside from that, provides as a storage site for excess calcium. Calcium may be removed from bone to maintain a normal blood calcium level, which is essential for blood clotting and proper function of muscles and nerves. That is why the reason why bone can store a calcium. So can you imagine the bone stores 99% of the body calcium and 85% of course, another element which is phosphorus. It is very important to keep the blood level of the calcium within a narrow range. If our blood calcium gets too high or too low, the muscles and the nerves will not function. in times of the needs. For example, during pregnancy, or calcium can be removed from the bones. That is why in this statement, calcium may be removed from bone to maintain a normal blood calcium level. So to be specific, what stage in that case? So during pregnancy, calcium can be removed from your bone to maintain your normal blood calcium level. So always remember how percentage that the calcium stores in your bone. So as I've said, 99% of the body calcium stores, of course, in our bone, and 85% of the element which is called as phosphorus. Okay, so let's proceed to the next slide. So this is the summarization or the illustration on how calcium regulates. So from the different part of it. So from the start, which is our parathyroid gland. So as we can see, how the calcium will increase, what part. So yes, and the calcium reabsorption from the bones. Yan. So this is actually a representation or illustration lang on how calcium can be on how calcium regulates inside your body. So this is the representation. Okay? So that would be the end of our discussion for the first part of skeletal system. So let's continue it for the second part.